What does the life of a 70s TV legend look like today? For Antonio Fargas, the actor who became a household name as the unforgettable Huggy Bear on Starsky and Hutch, the journey has been one of glamour, grit, and survival. From the bustling streets of New York City to the bright lights of Hollywood, his story spans more than 5 decades in show business. Now, at 78 years old, Fargas remains a vibrant figure with a career, family, and lifestyle that continue to captivate fans around the world. Antonio Fargas's net worth and career journey in 2025. As of 2025, Antonio Fargas's estimated net worth stands at $1 million. In the world of Hollywood, where billion-dollar empires and multi-million-dollar contracts dominate headlines, that figure may appear modest at first glance. But in truth, it tells a far more interesting story. Fargas's financial journey is not one built on blockbuster paychecks or celebrity endorsements. Instead, it is the story of a man who carved out a lasting place in Hollywood through sheer endurance, passion, and resilience in an industry that was not always welcoming to black actors. To understand what this net worth represents, we have to go back to the early 1970s. Hollywood was in the midst of a cultural shift. For the first time, African-American actors were breaking into mainstream cinema in larger numbers, particularly through what came to be known as the Blaxploitation era. These films, gritty, stylish, and often controversial, opened doors for performers who had been sidelined for decades. And Antonio Fargas was one of the actors who seized that moment. He appeared in a string of hits that are now considered classics: Shaft, 1971, Cleopatra Jones, 1973, and Foxy Brown, 1974. These films weren't paying actors superstar salaries. Most character actors earned between $5,000 and $15,000 per film, but what they offered was something even more valuable: visibility. For Fargas, those roles established him as a versatile performer capable of bringing energy, grit, and humor to the screen. Then in 1975 came the role that would define him for a generation: Huggy Bear on Starsky and Hutch. The show, which ran until 1979, was one of the most popular cop dramas of its time. But it wasn't just the titular detectives who captured the audience's attention. Huggy Bear, the streetwise informant with an unforgettable wardrobe and quick wit, became a breakout star in his own right. With oversized bow ties, flashy hats, and a charismatic grin, Huggy Bear wasn't just a side character, he was a cultural icon. Financially, the role also marked a turning point. Character actors on primetime TV during the late 1970s typically earned between $20,000 and $50,000 per season, with residuals from reruns adding to the pot over the years. While these figures didn't catapult Fargas into the realm of millionaires overnight, they provided him with something far more important: stability. And stability in Hollywood is a currency all its own. After Starsky and Hutch ended, Fargas didn't fade into obscurity as many feared. Instead, he reinvented himself again and again. He appeared in guest roles on some of the biggest sitcoms of the 80s and 90s, including The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Martin Living Single, and The Steve Harvey Show. Each of these appearances reminded audiences of his charm and versatility while supplementing his income. In addition, he performed in stage productions, lent his voice to animated series, and continued to collect residual checks from the syndication of Starsky and Hutch. It's important to note that Fargas's career wasn't about chasing blockbuster paydays. It was about longevity. For over 5 decades, he worked steadily in an industry known for being unforgiving, especially to black character actors. Every role, whether large or small, added another brick to the foundation of a career that has endured far longer than many of his peers. In 2025, Antonio Fargas's $1 million net worth is not just a number on paper, it's a symbol of survival in an industry where many careers burn bright and disappear quickly. It represents the residuals from a character that remains etched into pop culture, the guest appearances that kept him visible, and the countless hours of dedication on stage and screen. It also reflects the reality of Hollywood's pay scales in earlier decades, when African-American actors often earned far less than their white counterparts, regardless of their talent or cultural impact. For fans, Fargas's story is a reminder that wealth isn't always measured in dollars alone. His influence as Huggy Bear, his resilience through typecasting, and his determination to keep working long after the spotlight dimmed have given him something few actors achieve: longevity and respect. He may not own a $100 million mansion, but he has something equally valuable: a career that has spanned over half a century and a legacy that still inspires today. In many ways, Antonio Fargas's net worth is not the headline. The real headline is his endurance. He remains a living testament to what it means to succeed in Hollywood on your own terms, not through blockbuster contracts, but through character, craft, and the ability to leave a mark that time cannot erase. From Harlem streets to Hollywood fame. Born in New York City on August 14, 1946, Antonio Juan Fargas grew up in a world that balanced hardship with creativity. His upbringing was a true reflection of working-class America in the mid-20th century. His father, a hard-working butcher, represented grit, discipline, and survival. His mother, a seamstress, brought artistry, precision, and imagination into the home. Together, they shaped a young boy who would learn early on that life was about wearing many masks, sometimes to endure, sometimes to perform, and sometimes to dream. Growing up in a bustling, often unforgiving New York neighborhood, Antonio quickly realized that performance wasn't just something for the stage, it was a survival tool. As a young teenager, he often used humor, mimicry, and quick wit to navigate his environment, avoiding trouble while earning the respect of his peers. But what began as a way to cope with daily challenges soon turned into a passion. At just 14 years old, his life took an unexpected turn. His mother, noticing his energy and charisma, spotted an audition advertisement in the Amsterdam News, a Harlem-based publication. The ad was for an independent film called Cool World. She encouraged Antonio to give it a shot. That moment of maternal encouragement would launch a career that would span more than 6 decades. Young Antonio landed the role, and for the first time, he experienced the magic of transforming into a character in front of an audience. The taste of acting ignited a fire that never went out. Determined to refine his talent, Antonio pursued drama at the City College of New York, where he studied theater and performance. Later, he was accepted into the prestigious Actors Studio, one of the most respected acting programs in the country. Surrounded by giants and mentors who had defined American theater, Antonio learned not just technique, but discipline and depth. Acting wasn't about reciting lines, it was about embodying a life, finding the pain, the joy, and the truth in every role. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Hollywood was changing. The civil rights movement had shaken the nation, and African-American actors were slowly beginning to carve out space on screens that had long been dominated by white performers. For Antonio Fargas, this was the perfect storm. His timing couldn't have been better. His talent, charisma, and striking presence positioned him at the forefront of a new movement, the rise of black actors in mainstream film. His early filmography reads like a catalog of 1970s black cinema. He appeared in Shaft, 1971, Cleopatra Jones, 1973, and Foxy Brown, 1974, movies that were part of the Blaxploitation era, a genre that both empowered and stereotyped African-American characters. These films gave actors like Fargas visibility, roles, and steady work, even if they sometimes reinforced narrow depictions of black life. Still, Fargas stood out. His characters weren't flat. They had flair, humor, and depth. He brought a spark to every scene, refusing to play stereotypes as one-dimensional. His acting style reflected his belief that even the grittiest characters had humanity. Then came the role that would make him immortal: Huggy Bear on Starsky and Hutch. Beginning in 1975, Huggy Bear was unlike anything television audiences had ever seen. He wasn't just a background character, he was a slick, witty, street-smart informant who often stole the scene from the lead detectives. With oversized bow ties, loud jackets, wide-brimmed hats, and one-liners delivered with impeccable timing, Huggy Bear became a cultural icon of the 1970s. Antonio himself once joked, "Only Huggy Bear could carry that off, and I just went along for the ride." But it was more than a ride. It was the culmination of years of persistence, training, and bold choices. Huggy Bear wasn't just a role, it was a statement, a character that blurred the lines between stereotype and symbol. Of course, the success came with contradictions. Fargas found himself frequently typecast in roles that critics argued perpetuated negative images of black men, pimps, hustlers, and streetwise sidekicks. Some accused him of contributing to damaging portrayals of African Americans on screen. But Fargas had his own perspective. He didn't see himself as trapped by typecasting. He saw himself as a character actor. "I'm a character actor," he explained in interviews. "I'm proud of the niche I played. That was my part in black history in terms of black theater and black film." To Antonio, these roles were not just cliches. They were layered depictions of survival, resilience, and style, qualities that reflected the lived realities of many in his community. By leaning into them, he believed he was giving visibility to characters who, even if flawed, were authentic. And that is the duality of Antonio Fargas's career, both celebrated and critiqued, adored and questioned. But what can't be denied is the impact. Huggy Bear wasn't just a sidekick. He was a pop culture phenomenon. He influenced fashion, dialogue, and representation. Even decades later, references to Huggy Bear appear in music, film, and television, cementing Antonio Fargas as more than just a character actor. He became a symbol of an era. From the butcher's son in Harlem to a Hollywood legend, Antonio Fargas's early journey shows us that sometimes the most iconic stars aren't born in luxury or privilege. They're shaped by grit, passion, and the courage to take on roles that others might dismiss. His path reminds us that legacy isn't always about leading roles. It's about leaving an impression that time can't erase. Controversies, risks, and reinvention. Hollywood in the 1970s and 1980s was not a welcoming place for black actors. Opportunities were scarce, paychecks were modest, and systemic racism shaped every level of the industry. Leading roles for African Americans were rare, and the few that did exist often leaned heavily on stereotypes. Antonio Fargas knew this reality intimately. To survive and keep working, he had to adapt, to wear what he once described as many masks. It was both a survival tactic and a creative challenge. "You know how many masks I had to wear to survive?" Fargas admitted years later. For him, acting wasn't just about stepping into a character on screen. It was about navigating a world where every audition and every role carried both opportunity and risk. Fargas leaned into gritty roles that reflected the struggles of real life. He wasn't afraid to portray pimps, hustlers, addicts, or even flamboyant outsiders, because in his eyes, these characters represented more than stereotypes. They were survivors. They were fighters. They were people who, despite the odds stacked against them, found ways to exist in a world determined to silence or dismiss them. One of his most talked about performances came in 1976 when he played Lindy, a cross-dressing flamboyant character in the cult comedy Car Wash. At a time when Hollywood largely avoided portrayals of LGBTQ+ characters, Fargas's decision to take on Lindy was bold. The performance was colorful, humorous, and unforgettable, but it sparked debate. Some critics hailed it as a brave choice that challenged norms. Others accused him of feeding into caricatures. Even his own mother questioned his decision, asking if he was sure he wanted to step into such a role. But Antonio stood by his work. "If I'm respected as a craftsman," he explained, "then the courage to go there should be applauded." He believed actors had a duty to push boundaries, to take risks that others might shy away from. For Fargas, Lindy wasn't a punchline. He was a human being, vibrant and flawed, but undeniably real. This willingness to embrace controversial roles defined much of his career. Fargas didn't chase the safety of leading man status. Instead, he carved out a niche as one of Hollywood's most versatile character actors. He once compared himself to craftsmen who build with their hands, saying that character acting was about finding the truth in people that society often overlooks. Still, the toll of Hollywood's limitations weighed heavily. By the 1980s and 1990s, opportunities for black actors had improved, but were still far from equal. Many of the roles offered to Fargas repeated the same patterns: streetwise sidekicks, comedic relief, flamboyant outsiders. It was work, but it wasn't always fulfilling. At the same time, the pressures of fame and the unpredictability of steady employment began to seep into his personal life. The 1990s proved especially challenging. Fargas struggled with alcohol and tobacco addictions, openly admitting later that he had hit rock bottom. Years of performing, hustling for roles, and living in the shadow of his most famous character had left him drained. He was no longer the young Harlem kid with endless energy. He was a veteran actor battling demons behind the curtain of Hollywood's glitz. But Antonio Fargas was nothing if not resilient. He found the strength to confront his struggles head-on, a process that would take years and test every ounce of his willpower. A pivotal moment came in 1994 during the devastating Northridge earthquake in Los Angeles. The quake struck with violent force, reducing homes and buildings to rubble. Antonio and his wife were in their home when it hit, separated by collapsing walls and debris. For a terrifying period, each thought the other might be dead. Fargas eventually managed to break through a door, reuniting with his wife safely. The experience shook him to his core. Facing the possibility of death in such a sudden, brutal way forced him to reevaluate his priorities. Life, he realized, was too fragile to waste in cycles of addiction and self-destruction. That earthquake, as catastrophic as it was, became a turning point. It sparked his commitment to recovery and gave him a renewed appreciation for survival, not just on screen, but in real life. From then on, Antonio began to rebuild himself, not just as an actor, but as a man. He cut down his addictions, recentered his life, and leaned into roles and projects that reflected his maturity and experience. The fire of Huggy Bear still lived within him, but now it was tempered by the wisdom of survival. Looking back, Fargas has often said that his career was not about avoiding criticism or chasing fame. It was about authenticity. Whether playing Lindy in Car Wash, Huggy Bear in Starsky and Hutch, or countless other gritty characters, he brought depth and humanity to roles others might dismiss. He turned stereotypes into living, breathing people, giving them humor, dignity, and resilience. His 70s and 80s career may have been filled with contradictions, celebrated yet criticized, bold yet constrained, but it cemented him as a pioneer. And his battles in the 1990s, both personal and professional, proved that his resilience extended far beyond the screen. For Antonio Fargas, the story was never about fame alone. It was about survival, about wearing masks when he had to, but always finding a way to show the truth underneath. Family, fame, and legacy. Behind the scenes of Hollywood glamour and iconic roles, Antonio Fargas's family story has been just as layered and compelling as his career. Fame may have made him a household name, but like many actors, the realities of balancing work, personal life, and family responsibilities brought both joy and heartbreak. Fargas was married twice, and both relationships were deeply impacted by the demands of a career in entertainment. His first marriage came during the height of his Starsky and Hutch fame, a time when Hollywood's pressures were relentless. Constant travel, long shooting schedules, and the ever-present spotlight made stability difficult to maintain. The marriage eventually ended in divorce, and Fargas admitted years later that the price of chasing success in Hollywood often came at the expense of family life. Still, he didn't give up on love. His second marriage brought him happiness and companionship for nearly 2 decades. He married Sandra Devi Fargas, a woman who became both his partner and his grounding force outside of the industry. Their union lasted 17 years, a remarkable feat in an industry where marriages often crumble under the weight of public scrutiny and private challenges. Tragically, Sandra passed away in 2023, leaving Antonio heartbroken. At 76 years old, losing his wife after nearly 2 decades together was a devastating reminder of life's fragility. In interviews, Fargas reflected on how Sandra had been his anchor, someone who believed in him when the cameras stopped rolling and the glamour faded. Her loss marked one of the most difficult chapters of his life. Despite the grief, Antonio found reasons to keep smiling through his role as a father. His son, Justin Fargas, became one of his greatest sources of pride. Born from Antonio's earlier relationship, Justin grew up surrounded by the challenges and privileges of having a famous father. But instead of following his dad into Hollywood, Justin forged his own path into sports. Justin became a standout running back, playing college football at the University of Southern California before moving on to the NFL, where he joined the Oakland Raiders. Known for his speed and toughness on the field, Justin earned respect as a reliable player, proving that the Fargas name could thrive in arenas far beyond Hollywood sound stages. For Antonio, watching his son succeed in professional sports was an indescribable joy. In fact, for years, people introduced him not as Huggy Bear, the TV legend, but simply as Justin's dad. He laughed about it in interviews. That's not so bad. It's great to see your name and heritage passed on for a man who had spent his life carving out a legacy in film and television. Seeing his son carry the Fargas name into an entirely different sphere of American culture was profoundly satisfying. Justin's marriage added another layer of accomplishment to the family legacy. He wed Nikki Caldwell, a powerhouse in her own right. Caldwell, who built a successful career as a basketball coach, went on to become the president of the Las Vegas Aces, one of the premier teams in the WNBA. With her leadership and visibility, she became a role model for women in sports and executives across the country. Together, Justin and Nikki became a symbol of hard work, resilience, and modern success. In many ways, they carried Antonio's legacy forward, showing that the Fargas name stood for determination, visibility, and cultural impact, whether in entertainment, sports, or leadership. For Antonio, watching his son and daughter-in-law thrive offered a different kind of pride than fame or money ever could. It was legacy in its purest form, family succeeding on their own terms. Still, Antonio's family journey wasn't without hardship. Beyond Sandra's passing in 2023, he has often spoken about the difficulties of balancing fame with fatherhood. Hollywood's demands meant he wasn't always present in the way he wanted to be, but as he grew older, he embraced his role as a supportive father and grandfather, cherishing the moments of togetherness that fame had once stolen from him. What stands out most about Antonio Fargas's family story is the way it mirrors his career. Just as he had to fight for survival and recognition in Hollywood, his family navigated their own struggles, victories, and public scrutiny. And just as his characters often embodied resilience, Antonio himself showed resilience in his personal life, rebuilding after divorce, grieving after loss, and celebrating as his son created his own legacy. Today, when people look at Antonio Fargas, they don't just see Huggy Bear, the flamboyant informant with the oversized bow ties and hats. They also see a father, a widower, and a man who has lived through love, loss, and renewal. They see someone who takes pride not only in his own career, but in the achievements of the family who carry his name forward. In the end, Fargas's family story proves that true legacy isn't only about the roles you play on screen. It's about the lives you touch, the people you raise, and the heritage you leave behind. For Antonio, his greatest pride may not be the iconic character that made him famous, but the family who will continue to keep the Fargas name alive for generations to come. The House of Huggy Bear. What does the home of a 70s legend look like in 2025? Antonio Fargas's Los Angeles residence is a mid-century modern haven. Nestled in a quiet upscale neighborhood, it balances warmth with sophistication. Large windows flood the rooms with light, while wood floors and modern fixtures give it understated elegance. The living room centers around a cozy fireplace, while the dining room flows into a sleek kitchen with polished countertops and high-end appliances. The master suite, overlooking the backyard, is a peaceful retreat. Outside, there's a pool, lounge areas, and manicured gardens, a perfect space for hosting family or enjoying California's year-round sunshine. It's not a mansion dripping in gold, but a comfortable, stylish retreat that reflects who Antonio Fargas really is: grounded, vibrant, and timeless. Style, music, and influence beyond acting, Antonio Fargas has left his mark as a fashion icon. Huggy Bear's flashy hats and bold suits influenced pop culture for decades, even referenced by Rihanna in her hit beat "Yours Better Have My Money." Today, Fargas still embraces bold looks, even experimenting with blonde hair for a European TV role. "Hats are my thing," he laughs. "They make me feel powerful." He also has an underappreciated gift: music. Over the years, Fargas has performed in small venues and contributed to music projects, surprising fans with his vocal chops. He often jokes that singing isn't his main gig, but admits it keeps him young. Advocacy and reflection. Antonio Fargas has always been outspoken. He supports LGBTQ+ rights, drawing from his own family experiences. Growing up with a gay brother who faced abuse from their father, Antonio vowed to use his platform to promote acceptance. His characters, often outsiders and survivors, carried echoes of that personal mission. When asked how he's managed to stay cool after all these years, Fargas smiled. "Cool comes from inner peace. If it shows on the outside, You're really doing it. Antonio Fargas in 2025. In June 2025, Fargas appeared at the Monte Carlo Television Festival, looking almost unrecognizable to some fans, sporting glasses and a graying goatee. Time has left its mark, but his charisma remains intact. He continues to work selectively on independent projects that highlight diverse stories, proving that even after decades, his passion for storytelling hasn't dimmed. His legacy is multifaceted. To some, he will always be Huggy Bear, the flamboyant informant who stole the show. But to others, he is a trailblazer who helped open doors for Black actors in Hollywood, a survivor who overcame addiction and grief, and a father whose legacy continues through his son. Antonio Fargas's story is one of resilience, reinvention, and lasting impact. From Harlem to Hollywood, from Huggy Bear to elder statesman of Black cinema, he has shown that true legends don't fade, they evolve. His career, lifestyle, and advocacy reflect a man who embraced every opportunity, survived every setback, and left a mark on entertainment history that will never be forgotten. So what do you think is the most remarkable part of Antonio Fargas's journey? His rise to fame, his personal resilience, or his influence on pop culture? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of a Hollywood legend, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of the stars who shaped our world.